Hello, welcome back to GOODREADS. Today I'm going to be talking about Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley. I read this on my Kindle while I was on holiday and I don't have a real physical copy of it. Apart from I do, this is called the Frankenfont Project, and it starts, it's basically like using a survey of the most commonly used like web-safe typefaces, I guess, or like Windows typefaces that just come on your computer. And it starts off with just like using all the normal ones and then descends into anarchy. So the last chapter is like wingdings and impact and stuff like that. Very interesting as a piece of art, not very legible as a piece of literature. So Frankenstein was written in 1818, so close to 200 years, guys. So in 1818, Mary, soon to be known as Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, her future husband, Lord Byron, and a couple other people, they're just like chilling in Geneva on the side of a lake, and it's really boring, so they come up with a writing contest, and it was probably the most successful novel contest of the 1800s. So they were talking about medical advancements and electricity that leads to bringing things back to life, and then Mary Shelley had like a really bad nightmare, and then she wrote Frankenstein. The story begins in the Arctic, where on a ship they spot a man on a sled going through the ice in the Arctic, and basically pick him up, and it's all written epistolary style from the captain of the ship, Captain Walton, back to his sister? I want to say sister? The man on the ice was Victor Frankenstein, and he proceeds to tell the captain the story of what has led him there. Just before Victor was going to university, his mother died, but he went to university anyway, got really involved in like biochemical sciences, and ended up creating this monster out of like animal parts and corpses that he animated into life. And he was so shocked at how hideous it was that the monster ran away, and he then had a big case of brain fever and for 4 months was like just in bed and in shock. He is called home when he finds out that his little brother has died, and while he's at home he sees like a few fleeting glances of the monster and like knows that he is the cause of it. The death of the brother was put on the nanny, and the nanny was hanged, and he couldn't do anything about it. So Victor goes off to try and like figure himself out, and the monster finds him and wants to tell him what's happened. As soon as the monster was animated, he saw that Victor hated him, and ran away and went to just live in the woods off like what he could, and then he put himself up in a cottage next to another cottage with a family in it, and listened to their conversations and slowly learnt their language. And he read a lot. He's actually probably more well read than me, at least. He read Paradise Lost, and he decided that it was time to befriend the people in the cottage next door. The dad of the household was blind, so he managed to like make friends with him without him seeing his hideous visage. But when he met the rest of the family, they saw what a monster he was, and they fled, and he kind of like realised that he was never gonna find love and no one would ever care about him because he's so fucking hideous. So then he went and killed Frankenstein's little brother, framed it on the nanny. Anyway, so he's come to see Frankenstein now to ask him to make him a mate. He says, "If I cannot have love, I will have revenge. All I ask is a female like myself. We will be monsters alone in the world, but we will have each other." Victor ends up agreeing to make a female mate for his monster. He puts it off for ages, and then he's like, oh my gosh, I am creating the end of the world, and destroys what he's made so far. And then the monster sees this, goes a bit crazy, kills Frankenstein's friend, and frames him for it, and says to Frankenstein, I'll be there on your wedding night. And then Frankenstein gets out of prison eventually, goes home to marry his like childhood sweetheart, and then lol, wedding night, obviously Frankenstein's monster kills the bride. And then bring it back to the present, Victor's chasing the monster all over the world, pretty much. Eventually on the ship, Victor passes away, and then the monster comes to him and says, I thought this would make me happy, but it doesn't. I'm still a ball of sad, angry mess, and I am going to give up and go out into the icy world and die. And that was a very long summary of what happens in Frankenstein. There are so many things that I could talk about in reference to this book, and they're all things that are quite contemporary as well as being issues 200 years ago, but I'm going to focus on 3. Firstly, the story as a cautionary tale. Secondly, empathy. And thirdly, feminism. The other title for Frankenstein was The Modern Prometheus. The story of Prometheus is a Greek myth where the titan Prometheus stole fire from Mount Olympus to bring it to the people. And in punishment, he was chained to a rock for crows to eat his intestines forever. I think that's how the story goes. Not very pleasant. But Prometheus is remembered usually as a good guy that had to just suffer eternally, even though he brought fire to the human race. Without fire, where would we be now? And then the parity for that is if Frankenstein's kind of technology and method was known, maybe we would have ended up in a better place. It's so ambivalent because Shelley references Prometheus and she references a lot of the Bible. There's a quote, I think, from the monster that says, "I should be your Adam, but instead I am your Satan." Throughout the story it's positioned as Frankenstein's monster being a monster, having all of that negativity, but it does play with that, has humanity gone too far? Because when the romantics think of Prometheus, they're like, oh no, he overstepped his mark, but it ended up with us having, you know, fire, something that has been necessary to human evolution. I personally don't feel like throughout the text it really concluded what side of that argument it lay on. I'd be interesting to see what you guys think about the whole overstepping human nature sort of thing. Anyway, that brings me on to empathy. The monster is always shown, as it's first revealed, as physically hideous and repulsive to people on that level. It's never that people are repulsed by the idea of reanimating corpses, it's more of the actual result. It just appears grotesque and wrong. And I think it's profoundly sad because the monster is so neutral at the start, in fact wanting to learn, wanting to be good, wanting to befriend people, and it's really the world's response to him that makes him bad. He says to Frankenstein, "I was good, but unhappiness made me evil." And he says at the very end, "I'm a sinner, but mankind sinned against me." It's one of those everlasting thought patterns, you know, eye for an eye. Empathy engenders empathy, evil engenders evil. And it feels really harsh when he's explaining the story of being rejected by these cottagers. Before that, he had such warmth in him for these people that had brought him knowledge, essentially. And then they just reject him. And obviously, like, there's no way that you couldn't turn into, like, a raging homicidal maniac if, like, the whole world is rejecting you. I think it's perfectly valid for him to be like, "Hey Frankenstein, make me a woman, make me something that is me, and then at least I can be happy, you know, with an equal." Because literally the monster is a mirror. It is reflecting treatment to it. Anyway, I do think that one reading of this book is pretty surface level, but it's, you know, you get what you give. This really reminded me of a very old film, I think it was like 1932, called Freaks, which was about circus freaks, you know, people with deformities that were performing as part of this circus thing, and they were always just treated so badly by the humans, by the humans? That sounded wrong, by the people that didn't have deformities, and it kind of, the whole story was actually about how those people, the people that are treating these performers with such disdain, they were the freaks. If anyone was just nice to the monster, nothing would have gone wrong. Aww. So, last topic, feminism. I wasn't going to talk about this until I looked through the notes on my Kindle and found one quote that I was just like, oh. So, Mary Shelley's mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, one of the earliest feminists, and although she died pretty much giving birth to Shelley, Mary Shelley definitely like took after her mother in terms of being outspoken and thinking about gender issues, and yet she decided to make a novel where almost all of the characters are men. And Victor Frankenstein basically just ignores the woman in his life. Like his childhood sweetheart, he ignores for years and just like goes off to university and makes this monster, and then, you know, goes off to then make the female version. Just like abandons her for a year, and then when he comes back she just gets killed because of his fucking negligence. This quote is from the monster explaining why he framed Frankenstein's little brother's nanny in his brother's death. "It's her fault, really. The fault of all the women who will never smile at me." Oh. Literally, could that not be taken from any, like, school shooting manifesto these days? I don't think the book is trying to be a feminist text, but I think the points where it touches on feminism, femininity, and, like, the woman's place, is so just perfect. The monster demands a wife as a companion, and not for her to have any sort of life, but just for him. He blames this one woman because the rest of the world has rejected him. I think that quote is fucking brilliant. This has been a video on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear them. I read this book about a month ago, so it's like my memory of it is a little rough around the edges, but it's brilliant. It's also quite short, so if you haven't read it, just go for it. It's not what you'd expect. Anyway, main takeaway is Frankenstein is the doctor, not the monster. That's it. That's all you need to know. And I will see you soon for another video. Bye.